Why should we let the class know?
And good morning, class. Is everyone here?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning,
Looks like
ma'am.
two students are not there. Akshat and Stanzin.
Ma'am, actually, Akshat had to visit a doctor in the morning, ma'am. That's why he's not here, ma'am.
What happened?
I don't know, ma'am. He just told me yesterday that he have to visit the doctor and he will be missing one or two classes due to it, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay, please put yourselves on mute. It looks like there is an echo that is happening because of somebody's mic being on. I don't know. Okay, so tomorrow is your test, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we do it in a written form only?
Uh, it can be in written form also as well as in oral. Um, Let me just prepare in a manner where you are able to do both. Okay.
Well, how will you go about it then, ma'am? Like any student can be put up in any form.
No, no, no. If at all, I'll let you know.
Ma'am,
Let me.
yes, ma'am, oral maybe would be a bit uncomfortable, ma'am.
What
Ma'am, oral test
would be uncomfortable? Why?
थोड़ा मैम लाइक नर्वसनेस से भी हो जाएगा मैम बोलते टाइम एंड मैम थोड़ा अटक जाते हैं
तो कोई बात नहीं,
मैम
अटकने के
थोड़ा
बाद ही
वाइड टॉपिक भी है मैम लिखते टाइम ज्यादा अच्छा एक्सप्लेन कर पाएंगे इन दैट सेंस आई थिंक यू वुड बी गिविंग ओपन एंडेड टाइप क्वेश्चंस ओनली राइट सो मैम एक्सप्लेन करने में मैम थोड़ा मैम क्योंकि बहुत टॉपिक्स है इसमें
let me see. I'll let you know. Okay. I'll let you know. I'll let everyone. I'll inform Georgian, and then Georgian can inform the class. But you prepare according to both, I would suggest. And let me see if it is well suited for an oral test, or is it more suitable for a written. Okay. I'll let you know by evening, Georgian. Okay.
थैंक यू मैम
It won't be so complex that you won't be able to answer anything like that. Don't worry. Just prepare and see. In your preparation, one thing that you should always remember when you're studying anything, that the topics that you're studying, you should be ready with contemporary examples. That is the most important thing. I have given you people examples of times when ecology began. I've also given you contemporary examples, but at the same time, how ecology began as a subdiscipline in anthropology, that is more my concern. That is primarily my concern, because I'm trying to explain the theoretical points here. So I'm trying to explain to you theoretical perspectives. Okay. So keeping that in mind, I suggest that you also look for contemporary examples. So don't do you know don't limit yourself to reading only the theories. Try to also cover things like, how is this theory relevant today. Okay. That would make your work rather easy, and that would also prepare you for the exams, and that would also help you in understanding various theories. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the last time we have already done determinism, we have done possibilism, and we were doing new ecology, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, I think finished with neo-ecology.
Just a moment. Now,
Ma'am, we did techno environment materialism.
Yes. Did I think I forgot to tell you people about George Perkins Marsh. Did I tell you about him? When I began with the concept of culture area, environmental determinism, I mention somebody called George Perkins Marsh?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so just add his name, George Perkins Marsh, his name to your list. I'm not asking you to prepare anything on him, but just read up on him. Okay, George Perkins Marsh. I'll write in the chat section for all of you. Just a moment. Because he is somebody who has written immensely about ecological concerns. So I would suggest that you read something about George Perkins Marsh and his contribution to ecology in not just anthropology but in ecology in general. And let me tell you, it is not something which is restricted to biology, but it is also, it goes beyond and it takes into account social sciences also. So I think it is visible to all of you, George Perkins Marsh's name.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. Okay. So we had done new ecology, and we had also done in new ecology we had done the idea of techno environmental. Just a moment, I'm a little confused today. Yes. No, I think we were doing cultural materialism, right? Because in techno environmental materialism was something which was in cultural materialism. Yes, Depanshi?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, because we did direct payoffs and indirect payoffs.
Hmm. Yes. Vasundhara, did you find answer to your question?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, there's multiple like people. Some sources say that it's Whistler. Others say it's Alfred Kober.
Both of them have contributed. So,
Ma'am, because there's this whole idea of German diffusionism affecting the same theory, right? So, uh, like there's
yes,
German diffusionism played a major part in that theory. So that is
yes,
why, yes, ma'am. So both of them contributed.
good. Now I shall, what I'll do is, if I think that you are supposed to read a little more, I will ignore the questions. Okay, this is something that I have devised as a plan. Instead of telling answers to everything, if I want all of you to read a little more, then I shall ignore the questions. Okay,
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
because at least that way it will force you to read a little more and not restrict you to class discussions only. So anyway, okay, so since I was doing cultural materialism, I had mentioned the work of Marvin Harris. Okay, and I had told you about how Marvin Harris had talked about various ways in which a cultural institution can have a direct material payoff, in the sense that if we look at say kinship, and if we look at how the kinship is contributing. So one of the things that I told you was, when marriages take place, one of the things is obviously the continuity of the progeny, but at the same time we also have something called what do you say, um, we also have something called subsistence, food, protein, calories, all of these things that are a direct material payoff of marriage as an institution. So don't think of it as a modern, don't think of marriage as a modern example only. Think of marriage as an example where it sort of gives a family a sense of food and calories as well. Spare me the horror. First your phone call and now this. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In between there was something that happened. Just a moment. Yes. So yes. So I was just trying to tell all of you that when you take this into account, and when you take the fact that marriages itself, as I told you, was not just about procreation, was not just about survival. It did provide a major, one of the major contributions is legitimate progeny, okay, in marriages. But other than that, what has happened is that marriages also give you an opportunity for subsistence of a family, because then it becomes the responsibility of the people who have married to provide for them, for each other, as well as provide for the children that they are going to have, or they have already had. So keeping all of that in mind, you have to understand that you have to understand that every institution, every social institution has a direct material payoff. Okay.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes.
Ma'am, is it related to kin ordered mode of production that was proposed by Eric Wolf?
Just can you repeat it? I don't know why I'm getting disconnected. Can you repeat, the Dipanshi?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, as the direct payoff of marriage is subsistence, and Eric Wolf he proposed three mode of productions. He critiqued Marxist theory, Marxist communism, and so he tells about capitalist, tributary, and kin ordered. So can we
Hmm.
relate this to kin ordered mode of production?
Yes. Yes. You'll also find that, very interestingly, you'll also find that agricultural economies generally tend to have joint family system, and generally don't have working women. The concept of working women is less prevalent. You will have it maybe later in life. Some women may find opportunities to work, but mostly the agricultural families, the families that have background in agriculture, you'll always find that the women don't work um, outside of the family itself, because they have to take the role of provider, because the men are involved in the economic subsistence of the family. So as a result of that, the chances of their what do you say, the chances of their going out become more and more limited. But yes, it is where you will find kin order as a relevant example. So yes, marriage can be taken as a kin order. Yes. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Anyone else?
can order in the sense,
She's yeah. Yes, go ahead with your question, Jay.
Ma'am, what do we exactly mean by kin order?
Basically, the mode of production that was, you know, how do I explain this to you? I just give you a good example. Like I just talked about an agricultural family. Let me just tell you. See, on a field, in a family, on a field, you require more working hands. Okay, so you have to take all your decisions accordingly. Are you getting my point? Because you have to constantly take into account the fact that I require, if I'm head of the household, I'm the male head of the household, and I have some acres of land for for agricultural field, and that is my main source of income. I will sort of prepare, if I produce if I have sons, and suppose I have 5 sons, I will, in my mind, it may not always be true, but in my mind, I would want at least 4 of my sons who will work on the field itself. And I don't mean that working on the field means that they will, start agricultural practice. They can be educated, and they can be educated agriculturists. Are you understanding? So that they are capable of employing agricultural laborers. Now, so it is in my interest. One single person cannot take care of such a large area of land. So it is in my interest to actually take into consideration the fact that first of all, my family should be big and it should increase in number, and second, our vision should be to acquire more and more agricultural land as the number of dependents increase. And who are these dependents? The women and the children. Are you getting my point? So what kin ordered mode of production is basically when you have a large number of people, but they are linked to each other by relationship, by kinship relationship, and then labor is distributed accordingly. Are you getting my point? So the women automatically, automatically in an agricultural family, you will see women automatically taking domestic roles, because they can't possibly go and work in the field at all times. In some households, women go and sow the seeds. In some households, they go during the time of harvest. So all of that, so they can be, it doesn't mean that they should be uneducated, illiterate. It just means that they have to understand that agricultural land is the major source of subsistence for the family, and therefore they have to make sure that the kinship relationships remain intact. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, is
So,
this a main focus? Because I actually got full confused, ma'am. So would it be better if I just go over this and maybe come back to it later some other class?
what? With
Ma'am,
this
it's very,
question?
I'm not getting, yes, ma'am. Maybe
No,
it
no,
will
Ma'am,
just
same
set
thing.
no, no. She was asking something with regard to Marxist criticism done by Eric Wolf, and she just said that can we take marriage as an example of kin ordered mode of production? Okay.
मैम कैन बी एक बार बस मार्क्सिस्ट ही क्लियर कर दे क्योंकि वो रिलेशन नहीं समझ आ रहा है यहाँ पे
Georgian,
मैम आई मीन मतलब पता है मार्क्सिस्ट सेट की
I absolutely
जैसे
know. I
यूनिलिनियर
absolutely know. किसी ने Marxist anthropology नहीं पढ़ा है. I can completely understand, and that is, somewhere that is the fault. The fault is in our, curriculum also, that we don't place enough importance on Marxist anthropology. Jabki it is something which is very relevant. Marxism in general is very relevant to, you know, um, our outlook. Okay, so okay. Um, Tomorrow I have a class with all of you, which I can take, and there I can clarify everything with regard to Marxist anthropology. Okay. I will clear how it is relevant to ecology, how it is relevant to economy, and okay. Tomorrow's session will be on Marxist anthropology, And the test link, as I told you, I will share accordingly. So yeah, I have a class with you at 9:15 tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow I will revise this with all of you, because I completely understand that. Because see, when I tell you, when I give you a link and you say that ma'am there is no confusion, I absolutely know that either you have not read it or you have not followed it at all. Okay, so Marxist anthropology is something which I always insist on, because I know it is not covered in the curriculum. And if you ever plan on pursuing social sciences for your higher studies, you are going to face, you know, a lot of problems. You will have a lot of concerns, because most of the curriculums across the country include Marxism in their curriculum. It is a part of their syllabus. So keeping that in mind, I insist that you study Marxist anthropology, even if it is a very small topic in ecology. Okay, but why Dipanshi was talking about this is because we were talking about direct material payoffs. And what are the direct material payoffs? And I told you that in every institution, one is, of course, why do people get married? Do they always end up having children? No, that is not true. Why do people get married? One of the reasons is that they want some sort of companionship. Now, what you would say that there are friends for companionship, but the thing is that that companionship is limited. However, in a marital relationship, the companionship also includes not just companionship but also intimate relations, but also the fact that there is a sense of psychological security, okay, which people seek in most of the relationship. A friend may not always fulfill all of those boxes, and therefore it remains limited in terms of its relationship. So one of the reasons why a social institution is formulated, there are two things. One is obviously the material benefits that people derive from the institution itself, and the second is the emotional and psychological fulfillment that people seek. Why do people have children? We all know that we are all going to die. It's a fact. We all know that. It's a reality that we have been told, and we have also realized ourselves. Then why should we bother about what is going to happen to our property? Why should we bother about whether our name will be carried out by somebody or not? We are not. Are you getting my point? That should not be a concern, because we know once we die, we die. Nobody knows what will happen to us. So, but imagine marriage as an institution, and children, all of these together bring about a sense of security for a future where you may not be present. Are you getting my point? There comes a time when people become really helpless and old, and they want to depend on something, and that is the point when they depend on their children. So as you can understand, it's almost like a reciprocal exchange that goes on between parents and children. There are several kinds of emotional security that people derive. So if a couple is married but doesn't have children, and they don't want to have children, and it is a conscious choice, it's fine. So that means they are resolved to understand that nothing after they pass away, nothing is going to be there in their name. Okay, sometimes that causes a lot of trauma to people. Are you understanding? Are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is not the direct material payoff, as you can understand. This is the indirect payoff. This is the emotional and the psychological fulfillment that people seek and that people get. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now when we look at the direct material payoff, obviously the direct material payoff includes all those things which are observable, which are tangible. I told you about tangible and intangible. You remember? So the fact that there is something that can also be tangibly deduced from this association is something which is a direct material payoff. That is all you need to understand in terms of Marvin Harris's idea of cultural materialism. Okay, now what do materialists do? Marvin Harris was obviously not the last cultural materialist, because he was the person who introduced the idea of cultural materialism. He obviously did not take into account the psychological and sociological factors of an institution. He just took into account the material gains of an institution. Now, obviously, this is something which is not a theoretical idea. It can just be looked at as an approach to conducting research. Now, please understand that materialists tend to look at the specific trends and the traits of an institution, of an event. They don't always focus on the general trend, but they are more focused on the you can say they are more focused on the unique trends of each event. Obviously, overlooking the non-material aspects of culture is something that was immensely criticized for cultural materialism. Okay, but it has been considered as a very important research approach for anthropologists, because anthropologists are able to understand um, you know anthropologists are able to take into account basically the tangible results of any belief system, any ritual, all of that. Now I will give you an example. I in under cultural materialism, we have this Marvin Harris's approach, and what Harris did was that he studied the role of sacred cows in India. Okay, now what he did was he studied the role of the sacred cows in India from a functional as well as a materialist perspective or approach. Please listen carefully. Now, to Hindus, cows are sacred and cannot be eaten. Now, Hindu religion includes a belief in why is cow not consumed? Does anyone know that?
Ma'am, because it's believed that the body of a cow incorporates all of the gods in different parts of,
Okay. Anyone
like
else?
all
Ma'am,
of the
because of
gods live in the cow.
ma'am, because of Nandi, who was uh, in Shiva, he was the I don't know what to say that, but because of Nandi, we actually respect cows. This is also a reason we actually worship.
Okay. Anyone else who can add to it?
Ma'am, it's just in our village, but I have seen that there is a tradition to worship and honor the animals that we tend to use in our daily life, or the animals which bring us benefit in some way or the other. So that may have also contributed to worshipping of cow, I think.
Interesting outlook, Jay, and I find it you've made my job very easy. But do we worship goats and chicken?
Ma'am, I think there was somewhere where they worship goats, if I remember correct. I really don't remember where it was, but I I certainly know that there is. It was, I think, mm, like somewhere in Latin America. I think there was some people who tend to worship goats as like uh, uh, a symbol basically.
Okay, but now what you have done is we have moved to Native America. So Native America has moved outside the purview of Hinduism. What Marvin Harris did was that he studied Hinduism, primarily Hinduism, and tried to understand the sacred cow. Now, very interesting is the fact that yes, Hindus also are known to domesticate chicken and pigs and goats, but cow remains sacred to them and not exactly other animals. What is the reason? Okay. Now Vasundhara says that it is because Divya, you want to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. Now Vasundhara says because gods and goddesses reside in various parts of the cow. Okay, that is one version. Another version which is written in our scriptures is that our ancestors are reborn as cows. Okay, now if we would be consuming cows, then it would amount to cannibalism. Okay, that's also one thing. Are you getting my
Yes,
point?
ma'am.
So the reincarnation, because Hinduism believes in the cycle of birth and rebirth and being reincarnated as a cow, therefore a cow is not consumed by Hindus. Now, interestingly, to many people in the Western country who consume beef on a daily basis, uh, this would seem very strange that people in India would rather starve to death than consume beef. Okay, there are various versions to it. I don't know if you've studied the difference between Sanskritization and Brahmanization. Have you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
What is the
ma'am.
difference? What is the
Yes,
difference?
ma'am.
What is the difference? Saying yes doesn't suffice. What is the difference between Brahmanization and Sanskritization? Quickly.
Brahmin-
Hmm?
Ma'am, in Brahminization, the lower caste found a way to go to move upwards in the caste system, and in Sanskritization, what they did was they moved abroad. Not they moved up in the status, but not in the caste that system, but they moved abroad and
Ma'am,
had
is
education.
ma'am, isn't that
Georgian?
modernization what Georgian is saying?
Vasundhara, just a moment, Georgian.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Can you turn on your video? I really would like to see you when you speak about Sanskritization and Brahmanization like this.
What, ma'am?
Do you know you have completely confused yourself? Brahmanization, Sanskritization, कहाँ चले गए तुम? Abroad चले गए तुम? You have to you have to read Sanskritization and Brahmanization, and you have to understand the relevance of what is pre-Vedic time, what is Vedic time. Why am I mentioning it? Because during the Vedic times, Brahmins are known to consume beef. Okay, it is already accounted for. They are known to be taking somras, which is the nectar of the gods, which is essentially liquor, alcoholic drink. Okay, the reason, Georgian, don't get confused. Okay, too much of information sometimes mixes up things. Very simple. Sanskritization, Brahmanization are the same thing, same things. The difference is when a person of the lower Varna aspires to move to the Brahmin Varna, it is Brahmanization. And when the person of lower Varna aspires to move to any of the Dvija Varna, then it is Sanskritization. Are you understanding? Abroad jana, padhai karna is a different thing. The aspiration to move from lower varna to higher varna in itself, the caste mobility in itself is something which is known as Sanskritization. Now why is it called Sanskritization? Because it was believed that the knowledge of Sanskritic scriptures was limited to, till the time it was limited to Brahmins only. The same procedure of Sanskritization was known as Brahmanization. Okay, sticking to a particular Varna and aspiring to move to that Varna. Georgian, are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you realizing where all you were making these mistakes?
मैम शायद कोई previous example मन में बैठा था इसलिए वो abroad वाला बोला, but okay ma'am.
Vasundhara, you were saying something.
Ma'am, I was saying the same thing you were saying, because this moving abroad thing is actually sort of related to
Westernization,
sort of related to
urbanization, or modernization?
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, it's related to modernization, not westernization as such, because ma'am, in modernization, I think, because we studied this in semester 2. So in
And you are
modernization,
in semester 5, है ना?
yes.
1.5 years में ऐसा भी नहीं होना चाहिए कि संस्कृताइजेशन ब्राह्मणाइजेशन को कुछ और बना दो.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am, that is
Blatantly
clear,
बना
ma'am,
दो.
because Sanskritization is something that we have done over and over again. We didn't give much importance to modernization as such, but Sanskritization and Brahmanization and twice born, all this we have done.
Yes. Georgian, you may not be, I completely realize that this may get confusing because it may not be a part of your reality. However, I would still say that you please read up on Sanskritization, and this is to all the entire class. The reason being that while you believe that you have figured it out in terms of Varna system, you have not. You are, what has been my experience with your generation is you're very aware of your caste, but you don't understand what is caste system, what is Varna system, what is the difference between caste and Varna system. And the reason for that is that you have actually not studied these, there are delicate differences, and what you tend to do is you tend to translate things that are written in Hindi or Sanskrit into English, and that is where the problem begins. Like, you must understand that the caste word is something which is not native to India, and it is something which essentially confuses you a lot because you automatically believe that caste is um, jati, which is not the case. So I suggest that you read up on this, and maybe some other time, if you have any confusions, we can address that. But the reason why I mentioned Sanskritization, Brahmanization is because I was talking about the Vedic times, and in Vedic times there is documentation of Brahmins consuming beef. Okay, post Vedic, this movement of not consuming beef started, but during the Vedic times there is you know accounts of, and it is mentioned in one of the Upanishads also. I think in Shiv Puran it is mentioned that Brahmins used to consume beef, and it was something which was the most sought after item, and therefore this was something which became a point of confusion and conflict. However, let us go back to Marvin Harris, and I want to quickly complete this section, that the analysis was done by Marvin Harris on the function of cows in the Indian society, and it was realized that a cow alive is more crucial than a cow dead. Okay, that is as simple as that. A cow alive is more useful to a society than a cow dead. Okay, they provide labor for plowing. काफी सारे agriculturists who cannot afford a tractor, they still use bullocks, ox and cow to drag their plows. Okay, so they cannot afford to buy sophisticated advanced agricultural machinery, so they depend on these animals. Cow dung is a fertilizer, cow dung is a fuel, Cow dung is also something which is used for cooking food, for so many things in the houses of people. It is used as you know it is used as a biogas and a lot of other products. uh, the other thing is cows are very efficient in taking their own food, so you don't have to specially go and feed them. They can actually clear the fields of the weeds by consuming the weeds, so they are very good at scavenging the trash and consuming the weeds, which keeps the area clean. And then they also provide milk. Okay, so now the byproducts of milk products is something which is also something which is very crucial to us. Therefore, the slaughtering of the cows for food is something which is not useful for us, because people who consume non-veg in among Hinduism do not favor slaughtering the cow as much as so can you understand direct material payoff? Are you able to understand the direct material payoff of a goat, chicken versus a cow?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Georgian, Jay?
Excuse me, ma'am. You just got disconnected for me in the middle. Like the last thing that I heard was the cow was more beneficial dead, alive than dead.
Oh, okay. So I just counted all the number of uses of a cow, and I said that farmers who are not able to afford sophisticated agricultural machinery generally use cows for resource, for pulling their plows, for seeding, for just mixing the agricultural land, and for turning the soil. Everything is done by the cows or the bullocks or the basically that particular bovine species. And then I said that cow dung is something which is used as biogas, fertilizer, and so many other things. It is also something a lot of people burn cow dung because it repels mosquitoes and insects. So that is also there. So there are so many uses that it was realized that slaughtering of the cows is something that will not have a direct material payoff, because then it will just provide food. Okay, and the people who consume beef also do not kill a fertile cow. Please understand that do not kill a fertile cow, and therefore it is something, because it is in less money you are getting a bigger amount of meat. So that is one of the reasons why in Western countries cow is or beef is consumed, because it's just like us that we have larger number of goats being bred for slaughtering and for meat products, and larger number of chicken being slaughtered for meat product. But cow we use in so many other ways that it was realized that a cow alive is more functional and more materialistically relevant than a cow dead. Is it clear to all of you? This is the
Yes,
analysis
ma'am.
of Marvin Harris. This is the analysis of Marvin Harris. Now, obviously, when you realize that there is cultural materialism involved in the sacred status of the cow, you can't possibly go and convince a layman by saying, oh, you are doing this, you do not consume beef because you have direct material payoff, because then that is not the way to go. But functionally looking at it and materialistically looking at it, this is what Marvin Harris came up with in terms of his analysis. All right, is it clear to all of you? So this was cultural
Yes,
materialism,
ma'am.
and this was I'll do functionalism in detail, in greater detail with all of you. But this is cultural materialism, and I wanted you people to understand how the direct material payoff is something which is so relevant to all of us. And then I also said that the communities that consume beef do not consume those varieties or those species of those animals of the bovine species that are fertile or that give milk. It is only those that are sterile that are consumed for beef. Otherwise, even they do not use it as a commonplace meat product. Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am,
Oh,
would that mean like is it are we talking about the contemporary times when we say this?
Of
That
course, we're talking
the
about.
in the Western world they only consume the cows as beef when they are sterile and they
Nahi,
don't
nahi.
produce.
Vasundhara, you're not getting my point. I'm not talking about the Western world. I'm not talking about. I'm just talking about the Indian society,
Okay, ma'am.
the Asian society.
Okay.
Okay. And even in the Western society, please understand cows are bred with the mindset that cows kya, the bovine species are bred with the mindset that they are not just going to be used for milk and for breeding, but they will be used for meat product also. However, you must understand that beef is supplied to the world by India. Okay, so the largest supplier of beef across the world is actually India. So that is why for us it is functionally a lot of uses and material purposes. I hope I have clarified the materialist perspective to all of you. Is it clear to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So we'll go to functionalism later on. Right now, I'll stop the class here. Let me quickly take your attendance. Okay. Yes, Abantika, Ankur, and Dipanshi.
Present, ma'am.
Can you see me, ma'am?
Yes, I can see you. Divya, Georgian, and Ishita. Abantika has not responded. I don't know why.
Ma'am, I'm present, ma'am.
Okay. Your voice doesn't reach me, so I have to call you once more. Divya, Georgian, and Ishita. Divya, can you hear me?
Present.
Ma'am, am I visible?
Yes. Yes, I can see you, Divya. I can see Ankur. Okay. Ishita.
Ma'am, am I visible?
Yes.
Present,
Yes, yes, Georgian, you are visible. Ishita is visible. Jay and Karan. Yes, Georgian, you're visible. Okay. Karan, 4 o'clock.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, 4 o'clock. Georgian, have you added his number to my group?
no, ma'am. Mentor meeting wala na, ma'am. I'll do
Please
it,
add
ma'am.
it. Please add it. Neha and Priyanka.
Ma'am, am I visible?
Priyanka, you are visible. Neha, you are also visible. Ritika, Samaksh.
Present, ma'am.
Okay. Vasundhara, Vipul, and Vishnu.
Present, ma'am.
Ma'am, can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. I can see Vipul. Okay. I can see Vishnu as well. Okay, thank you. I'll meet you people after tomorrow for the test. Okay. See you then.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,